In this video, we are starting with Android Studio and we'll be creating our first Android project. So we'll start by creating a new Android project in Android Studio. We'll explore the Android Studio IDE. We'll build our first application, which is a Hello World application. We will create a new emulator, which is a device you can see on your screen, and you'll be able to run that Hello World application that you created on that emulator. So instead of getting a physical device to test your application, you'll be able to test your applications on that emulator. We are using Android Studio version 3.5.2, and when you start this Android Studio IDE, you'll be presented with these options. The one we are looking at in this course is starting a new Android Studio project. You can also, if you have an Android Studio project that you already created, you can open it, an existing Android Studio project, or if your Android Studio project or your Android project was created before Android Studio, so it was created on Eclipse or another IDE, you can import it from this option. So again, we are only interested in starting or creating a new Android Studio project. So if we click on that, we'll be presented with this Create New Project window. Now for Android, we have multiple devices or multiple types of devices that we can create applications for. We have the phone and tablet, the Wear OS, which is for smartwatches, the TV for smart TVs, Android Auto for cars, and Android Things for Internet of Things devices that run on Android. In this course, we are interested in phone and tablet, and we can see that we have multiple options for creating our first activity. Now, an activity in Android is basically a screen that you see on your phone. So any screen that you see on your phone is basically an activity. And each activity contains at least two components. The first component is the layout, which is the graphical user interface that you see on your screen. And the second component is a Java file or the program file, which is, in our case, will be in Java, a .java file. Each activity will have these two main components, a layout file in XML and a Java file, which is a .java file. You'll see that Android Studio presents you with multiple samples of activities that are pre-built. The one we'll be using is an empty activity, but you'll see we have other activities that are available for us. For example, the Google Maps activity, which is similar to what you see when you are using an application like Uber or Lyft, or even another map program or a program that uses or utilizes a map in it. You can also see that we have a login activity, which is basically a username and a password with a login button. And you have multiple pre-built activities in here. The one we will be choosing for this Hello World application is an empty activity. And I'll be clicking next. And here you will be naming your application. So the name of the application, this is the name that you will see for your application, and let's call it Hello World. The second component here is the package name, and you'll see by default we have com.example.helloworld. You can change it to anything. Usually if you have a domain, it will be the inverse of that domain. So com.yourdomain and then your name of the application that you have here. The save location is where you want to save your project files in your local hard disk drive. And then the language. Again, we are learning Android development in Java, but you have another option, which is a newer option, which is Kotlin. Kotlin is similar somehow to Java, but we are interested in Java. The most important part here is to select the minimum API level, which is the application programming interface in Android. You'll be able to select one of these versions, and if you select for a previous version, so an older version, an API, for example, 15, that means you will be able to run it on all the newer versions. So 15, if you create an application with an API level 15, that means you'll be able to run it on API 16, 17, 18, and so on. So how do you pick which API level that you want for your application? If you click on Help Me Choose, it will display for you each one of these API levels, the name of the Android version, so ice cream sandwich, jelly bean, Kit Kat, lollipop, marshmallow, each one of them, what's the API level, and then you will see the distribution for that API level, which is how many devices in the world run that or can run an application that was developed with this minimum API level. And this is a cumulative distribution. So again, if you developed an app with an API level 15, that means it will be able to run on an API level 16, 17, and so on. However, if you developed an app with an API level 23, you will not be able to run it on the previous versions. So to choose, you have to look at two things. The first thing, how many devices you want to run your application on, or how many devices will be able to run your application. And another thing is the features available in that API level. So for example, if you wanted to develop an app that utilizes fingerprint security or authentication, to be able to do a fingerprint authentication, you will need to use at least an API level of 6.0 or 23, which is Android version 6.0. You'll see in one of the features available in Marshmallow, which is API level 23, is fingerprint authentication. So if your application utilizes a fingerprint authentication, you will not be able to do that in an API level before 23. However, your application will only be running on 62.6% of the devices available globally. So you have to weigh in the features that you have in your application and the amount of users you want your application to have. So if your application does not utilize fingerprint authentication and it does not utilize any of these, it's a better idea to go to a previous API level, which means you will have more users or more user exposure. So again, if you want more users to use your application, you'll go with a lower API level. However, you will not be able to access the features available in a newer API level. So if your application does not utilize any of these features, it's a good idea to go to a previous version. Once you selected your API level, I'm going to select API 15, you can click on Finish, and that will create your first Android project. Once your program or project is created, you'll see that you will get this perspective, and by default it opens these two files, the main activity.java and the activity_main.xml. Again, these are the two main files that you will get for your activity, a Java file and an XML file. On this left navigation window or pane, you'll see that we have the Project Explorer. This is the tab for the Project Explorer. And you'll see we have multiple folders in our app. We have the Java folder, which will include the package that you created with the .java file, the main activity.java. And then you have also a resources folder that we are interested in. And one of the folders in there is the layout folder. And you'll see we have the activity_main.xml. So when we created our main activity, or the first activity we created, we had the main activity.java file and the activity_main.xml. Again, the Java file is in the Java folder in the package that you created. The layout file or the XML file is in the resources folder or res folder in the layout folder, and then you'll find that layout file. There are some other folders in your app. One of them is the manifests folder. Inside here, you'll find an XML file, which is an Android manifest. If you double click on it, it will have all the information about your application. You can select your icon that you want to have for your application. You can select the label that will be displayed for your application. You can also change the theme. And every time you create an activity, you'll be adding that activity in here. So far we have the main activity, and this is the activity we have so far. Another folder we have also in the resources folder, we have multiple folders other than the layout. Anytime you wanted to add a resource to your application, like an image, audio, or any other type of resources, you will be able to add them in these folders. So for example, the application icon, you'll find it in one of these. You will see that we have multiple versions of the icon. Each one is for a different screen resolution. So if you click on this is the icon that you will have for your application, and this is what we get by default from Android Studio. You can change it later on, but for this Hello World example, we'll leave it as it is. So let's go back to our activity. Again, when you created the main activity, the empty main activity, you got two files. One is the main activity.java and the activity underscore main.xml. The main activity.java is the one that controls the behavior of your application. So you can think of it as it's what's happening under the hood of your application. The activity main.xml is basically what we see on the screen when this activity launches. So the activity underscore main XML, if you click on it, you'll see a sample of your screen and how it will look when you run your application. We can zoom in. In here we have the zoom. You can zoom in and see what we have here, and you'll see that we have the text field or text view that shows hello world, and that's what we will be displaying to the user when they launch the application. So again, to zoom in, you can use the plus sign in here, and that will zoom in, or you can zoom out using the minus sign. In here you can select the API version for preview. So for now we are previewing it as it will be running in an API version of 29. If you want to change that, you can change it later on, but for now we'll leave it at 29. You can also change the size of the phone that you are displaying your application on. So for now we are viewing it as Android 5.0, which is a device called Pixel. If you want to check it on a larger device, for example, the Pixel 3 XL, which is a 6.3 device screen, you will see that how it will look in that screen. You can also view it on a tablet, a Wear device, a TV, or even another virtual device. So let's go back and put it to the Pixel 5.0 screen, and this is how it's displayed. On the left here, we have all the types of widgets that we can add or views that we can add to our screen. So this one is actually a text view. This is what we use to display text to the user. We can add a button, we can add an image view, we can add another type of text. So we can add a text field that will accept passwords. So whenever we enter the values in here, they will be masked using a star or a dot. We can have a text field that only accepts numbers for phones, and a text field for the time, the date, and whatever we want. Different types of buttons. We can have a checkbox, radio group, radio button, whatever we want. We'll explore them later on. And then we have different types of layouts. The one we are using now is the default one, which is a constraint layout, but we'll look later on at different types of layout that will help me organize the items or views that I have inside that main layout. Now, what we are looking at is the graphical representation of our XML file, because we are looking at the design view or perspective. If you go to that text file, you'll see that we have it in an XML version or an XML view. This is similar to HTML. So you'll have a tag or you will have a type of view in here, and then you will have all the properties for that view. So we have a text view, and then we have the width, the height for that text view. We have what text we are going to display. We are displaying hello world, and then the location or the constraints we have on the location of that view. For now, we'll leave it as it is. This is the text, hello world, and that's what will be displayed for that activity when we launch it. Again, we have two ways to view our XML file, either in a text view, and that's what we are looking at here, or a design view where actually you see what the user will be seeing in their or on their screen. Now in here we have the build view, which shows you what has been built in that application so far. You can also look at the terminal. So if you are using system.out.println, this is where the output will be if you are using that. And you can also look at the logcat, which is similar to the debugger in Eclipse. For now, we do not need to look at this, so you can minimize it down and you will have a bigger representation of your layout, and you will see it in a bigger view. On this left location here, you will see that we have the attributes that we have for that view, which is the text view. So all the attributes that we saw in the text format of the XML, for example, the text value that we stored in that, or we are displaying in that text view, you will see that it's also available here as an attribute in the text attribute. So if we change it here, so instead of hello world, let's say everyone. Now when I change it here, it will change in here, and it will also change in here for me in the text view. So here's my hello everyone. It's changed here, and it's also changing in the text format in here. Let's go back to the original one. So I'm going to click Ctrl Z and we have it back to hello world. Now on the top here, you'll see what file we are actually using. So this is the file we are using, which is activity_main.xml. And you'll see the path that this file exists in. So it's in the layout folder, which is in the resources folder. On the right here, you will see that we can run or execute our program. But before we run our app, we need to create a virtual device that will be running our application on. I already have an application or a device created, which is a Pixel 2 with an API level of 28. If you click on Open AVD Manager, you'll be seeing all the devices available for you, or the devices that you created. If this is the first time you are using Android Studio, this list will be empty. To create a new virtual device, you can click on Create Virtual Device, and you can select one of the pre-built devices in here. So we'll see we have different options, the Pixel XL, Pixel 3a XL, Pixel 3a, and you'll see the size of the screen, the resolution, and the density and DPI. You'll also see if this device had a Play Store, which you might be able to use it later on if you are deploying your app on the Play Store and you want to check it in there. So let's actually create a Pixel 3a device. So I'm selecting the Pixel 3a. You can also change the category. So if you want to create a virtual device that is a TV or a watch or a tablet, you can select it from here. So I'm creating a Pixel 3a. You'll see the size of the screen is large, the ratio is long, the density, and the actual measurements of the screen, which is 1080 pixels by 2220 pixels. I'm going to click Next. You can also select what API level of that device you want to have. So for now, I'm selecting Pi. If you wanted to select another version, you first need to download that version. So if you click on download, that will download the version. I already downloaded Pi, which is an API level of 28, and I'm going to select that, and I'm going to click Next. Now I'm going to name this phone, or the virtual device name. So Android virtual device will be, let's call it test device, for example. And then I can select the startup orientation. But for now, I'll leave it at portrait, and I will leave these settings as they are. I will not use any advanced settings, and I'm going to click on Finish, which will create that device. So I have now two devices. I'm going to use this test device that I have in here now. So in the actions, you can actually start that device. If you click on Start, that will run that device, and you'll see the Android emulator is starting up. It will take a couple of moments to start up the device, and you'll see we have the options here that actually are physical buttons you might have in your device. So the back, the home, the overview, rotating right or left. So instead of you rotating the phone, if you click on this, it will rotate it for you. Volume up, volume down, and also the power button in here. So now that my device has loaded up, you'll see that it's actually similar to a regular phone that you will have. You can swipe up to display the different applications that you have. You can actually, if it's connected to the internet, if you're connected to the internet, you'll be able to also use the internet on that device too. So let's go back to our application and now try to run it. So if I click on the play here, it will start building the application. If we go to the build in here, you will see it's running some tasks and it will be building our application. If you go to the logcat, it will show exactly what's happening in here. And if you go back to the Android device, once your program is done building, so we have Gradle build running, once your application finishes building, you'll see that application on this device. My application was finished and it was installed on the emulator, and you will see that we have it now displaying on the emulator. This is the name of the application, and this was the text view that we had displaying in our application. If you go to the home, if you click home and you go display your applications now, you will see that one of the applications that you installed was called Hello World, and this is the icon we saw before when we explored our resources folder. If you click on it, you'll see we are going back to that application that we just created.